Hi and welcome to part 6 of the ultimate needle felted mouse tutorial. Today we're going to get our brush mats at the ready because we're going to be making the body wraps and the head wraps for our mouse. So get your felting multi-tool in your hand, ready to go, and let's crack on with the next part of the tutorial. The next stage in making our mouse is to make the body and head wraps, and for this I'm going to be using a white Gotland wool bats, and the reason I'm using this is because it's got a much more finer, smoother texture than the white Shetland that we were using for the core wool. So the the body piece that we're going to be making first is going to be roughly the same width as our brush mat, and what I'm doing, I'm just taking some excess from the sides because it's a large piece, and I'm just layering them in the middle of our body wrap, and that's just to create a bit more bulk and get rid of any kind of excess wool that we won't need around the edges once we've felted it. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and this is mainly because it's easier to do it now rather than once you've felted the piece. You can pull the pieces away once you've felted it, but it's just easier to do it prior to that. So it measures about 7 inches in length and about 4.5 inches in width, and it's got about 5 layers of wool on top of that, 5 to 6 layers. And once again, like I always say, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit less or a little bit more. So I'm just using my index and forefinger to hold the wool in place, and I'm going to just anchor it down with my 7 needle multi-tool, and just stabbing it up and down in a sort of straight bouncing motion on your brush mat. And because you've got a lot of layers of wool here, what tends to happen is the wools want to kind of pop back up because they're so lofty. So you just want to anchor it down a few times in between your index and forefinger. But obviously make sure you're wearing finger gloves and just do this really slowly. It doesn't need to be done quickly. So once that's anchored down, just start stabbing around the main centre of your piece. Don't worry about the edges. We're not bringing the edges in because we're going to use those to integrate into the body. And now I'm just flipping it like a piece of dough, and I'm just going to stab the other side. And it doesn't need to be stabbed really, really heavily. It just needs to be stabbed so the piece is integrated into itself and you're not going to have any loose pieces of wool escaping. So I'm just going to go, just checking it, making sure, and I'm just going to pull some of this wool off here because there's a bit of excess that I don't want. And just, if you do need to pull it once you've felted it, just pull it very lightly, and it should just pull away very easily. See, if you try and pull it hard, it's just going to pull the piece apart, which you don't want. So I'm just pulling those pieces away. Just measure that. So that's 6 inches in length now by about 4.5 inches still. So that seems like a good size. So that's your body wrap completed. And now let's move on to our head wrap, which we're going to make in a very similar fashion, but we're just going to measure our mouse this time to make sure we've got the right proportions. So I'm going to take my tape measure and we're going to start at the centre of the mouse's body, and then I'm going to roll it over his head to about an inch past his head, roughly, or half an inch. So I'm going to go with about 8.5 inches in length. And then that should give us enough to get over the head, and then I'm just going to measure the width of that as well. You want about 1 inch to come either side of your mouse's head. So I'm going to go with about 4.5 inches, just because it gives me a bit of leeway then, should I need to sort of have a bit more, but I can always remove it if I don't need it. So it's always better to have a bit more than not enough. So I'm just going to move you out of the way, mousey. And take some more Gotland white wool bats, and I'm just going to layer that again on the brush mat. And I'm just going to pull away again the excess at the furthest ends horizontally, and just layer it on top to give it a bit more bulk. So I've got 2 layers there at the moment. I'm just going to measure that. So that's about 4.5 inches in width again. So the same width as the brush mat if you're ever in doubt. And then it's about, oh, it's well over 10 inches in length. So I'm going to just remove a bit more. And I'm happy with how thick it is at the moment. So I'm not going to add any more of the excess to the top. I'm just going to remove this. So in all, you've got 3 layers there. And that's just over 8 inches now. So I'm going to start felting that into place like we did a moment ago. And another thing to remember when you're using your brush mat and you've got a lot of wool on your brush mat like I have at the moment is make sure that you're always felting into the mat. It's very easy to kind of slip off the edges and then break your brush, break your needles. So just always keep it hitting the mat, just checking, sort of stick more to the center areas rather than going for the peripheral edges on the mat, because you'll kind of your needle won't hit the mat and then you'll end up breaking the needles in your multi-tool. So I'm just bringing it down to the side. So I've got about an inch and a half of sort of fluffiness, if you want to call it that, which is going to help us blend in with the rest of the mouse body later on. And I'm just turning it, getting it all integrated. But once again, you don't need to have it really overly felted, because once we put it on top of our mouse head, it's going to be felted further anyway. So it's just to get those fibres knitted together. I've got a bit more than I want to here, so I'm just going to pull that away. And then again, so you want to hold the piece down that you felted and then just gently pull away the edges so it doesn't pull away at the main bulk that you've just felted down. So that looks good to me. So we are now going to place those pieces onto our mouse and everything is going to start looking really cool. So I'll see you in a minute.